We spent 3 days quietly, nothing happened. At 5:30 on the 16th of December, 1944, the battle started. And all I had was a pistol because of my job on the anti-tank gun. That's all it required. They were shooting through the walls. The Germans had us surrounded. And the plaster was hitting the lieutenant in the face, and he got all bloody. And he said, well, I guess we got to surrender. The Germans were across the street, and they fired it and shot the first man that walked out the door, dead. Second man got a shot in the leg, and I was third leg, and they hollered, stop shooting. One German saw my dog tags, and he read them, and he saw that I was Jewish, so he stuffed them into my shirt as a nice gesture. It was good and bad. I was born in Buffalo, New York, on December 1st, 1924. My father was born in Russia and came to the United States when he was 14 in 1911. My mother was German descent. She was born in Buffalo. And of course, we're Jewish. I was kind of mechanically inclined, so I went to a Buffalo Technical High School, which was all boys, and I learned a lot about engineering with the intention of going on to college. My dad was a plumber, and I spent a lot of time with him, helping him, and learning the plumbing business with the intention of going in the plumbing business. Everything seemed good, you know. You didn't think about the Depression. I went to high school. I got a job. There was a deli, a Jewish delicatessen on the corner near my house. And when I was 17, I had my own car. And I was in the store buying something, and they said, anybody here could make a delivery for me? And I spoke up, and I made a delivery. And it turned out I worked in this deli 4 hours every night after school, and I'd open it on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And I kind of ran the place because the owner was a playboy, and he appreciated somebody else doing his work for him. And for $6 a week, I had enough money to buy a car and take a girl out on a date on a weekend. You know, for $5 you go to dinner and you go to a show, and life was pretty good. People think the Depression was terrible, but if you were lucky enough to be in the right situation, so I had enough money. I kept my studies up and graduated. And because of the skills I learned as a draftsman, the teacher from my high school called me and said, you want a job? Go to this and this address. They need somebody. And I ended up being a tool designer working for what we called a job shop. And that meant that they brought work in to one location, but we got work from various aircraft companies. When I was 18, they gave me what they called a deferment to continue doing war work. Decided they needed my body more than they needed my head. So I went in the service. I went in 1943, around June of 43. I was sworn in Buffalo and put on a train and went directly to Georgia, Camp Stewart, Georgia. And I took basic training for 20 weeks in the anti-aircraft. One day in the life of a GI, you get up at 6:15 and have breakfast. You line up for chow and 7 or 8 o'clock. I don't remember exactly. You fall out for various exercises, classes in aircraft recognition, physical training, or it could be a hike for 2-3 miles. It could be practicing with a gun and a bayonet and hand-to-hand combat. Never had to do it, thank God, so it's just another thing I learned in the service. Or we'd go out on the rifle range and practice shooting. It was hot. It was the summertime. We were taking basic. And every week you'd take another hike, which would be a little longer. Like you start out 3 miles, then 5 miles, then 8 miles, 10 miles. After 18 weeks, we'd take a 25-mile hike with full pack, which weighed about 40 pounds. Something happened on the 25-mile hike that they weren't satisfied. We didn't do it good enough, or we didn't do it in the right timing. I don't remember, but we had to do it again. So I took 2 25-mile hikes in that basic training. Then at the end of the basic training, they asked if anybody had an IQ over 120, if they would so choose to do so, they could volunteer for Officers Training School, or it was Army Specialized Training Program, ASTP they called it. And that was, what is it? Well, it's going to college. And I said, that's for me. I figured, well, 4 years I'll be in college. I don't know if they go to overseas. And then they decided they needed my body more than my head. I went to infantry training with the 106th Division in Indiana, Camp Edinburgh. Then we shipped out in November. We got on the Queen Elizabeth, an old fancy ship, sailed across the ocean, took about 5 days, landed in Edinburgh, Scotland, got on a train and went south to a racetrack in England, south of London. My company's job of 200 men, job was to collect vehicles from all over England to take them into battle. So the day came, we got on a boat that was specifically built for carrying vehicles. Two men for each vehicle. Crossing the channel was very rough. Most of the sailors were seasick. Luckily, it didn't bother me. After 3 days, we were allowed to enter the Seine River, ran up the Seine River in France, and ended up in Belgium and took up our positions. I was with a squad of 10 men, and we took up a position on a roadhouse. We were told that the position had been very quiet. A second division, which was a very seasoned troops that had gone through the African campaign and everything. It never fired a shot. There was no action. There was just a holding position. So that's where they gave us, a green troop, the position to hold for another day. And we arrived December 13th. We spent 3 days quietly, nothing happened. But every night I would be on guard, looking out the window at the German line across the valley, and I could hear vehicles moving around, so they dropped flares. Our Air Force would drop flares, and they never did anything about it until the battle on 5:30 on the 16th of December, 1944. The battle started. Lieutenant told me to stay on guard in the window, and all I had was a pistol because of my job on the anti-tank gun. That's all it required. And I told him, my pistol is not going to do much shooting out of a window into a big valley. So we traded guns. He took my pistol and I took his carbine, and I never did shoot it anyway. But he shot my pistol. He sat in a room in this roadhouse. It was like a bar. When the battle started, the first person that walked through the door happened to be our medic. And the captain, the lieutenant, didn't wait to find out who it was. He just shot him in the eye. By 2:30 in the afternoon, we decided to surrender because they were shooting through the walls. The Germans had us surrounded, and the plaster was hitting the lieutenant in the face, and he got all bloody. And he said, well, I guess we got to surrender. We had no more ammunition, nothing else we could do anyway. So we lined up at the front door and opened the door and hollered whatever, and we walked out the door, and the Germans were across the street, and they fired it and shot the first man that walked out the door, dead. Second man got a shot in the leg, and I was third laying, and they hollered, stop shooting. And so there was no more shots. I didn't get any. Never got a scratch. But the medic who was shot in the eye was laying there. And that was the worst of it, I guess. Then they lined us up and interrogated us one by one, checked us for weapons. One German saw my dog tags, and he read them, and he saw that I was Jewish, so he stuffed them into my shirt as a nice gesture. It was good and bad. We were walked back to their lines. On the way, we helped pick up some of their wounded and carry them into their first aid station. And we spent the night in the German bunkers. The first night, I think we were in a room about maybe 10 by 10 with about 100 guys just standing there, you know, not much you could do. They'd walk us to another camp where we were interrogated, and then they put us on a boxcar and shipped us overnight to another camp which was about 30 miles south of Berlin, where we spent a couple of months. They'd line us up and count us. They would expect 5 men to be in line behind each other, and they'd go down counting 5 Mann, 5 Mann, 5. And that's how they kept track of us, make sure nobody left. The diet for the day would be a bowl of soup, and maybe a loaf of bread that you would divide up with 4 or 5 guys, and maybe a bowl of tea. I can't say hot tea; it would just be warm tea. And that was for the day. The soup was one place. The soup was made of rutabagas or turnips. Another place the soup was made we called it grass soup because it had a bunch of crap in it. Who knew what it was in it. One time there was an air raid where they told us to scatter. One of the guys found a chicken. After everybody's gone to sleep, he cooked the chicken in the stove, and I sat there and I said, how about a little? He wouldn't give me a damn piece. I just sat there with my tongue hanging out. He ate the whole chicken. The guards were mostly old men, and some of them claimed to be forced into the German army, like they were from Holland. They all claimed to be Dutch. And some of them would try to talk friendly with you, and some of them would claim they had relatives in the United States. One guard I remember was very nasty, And it turned out he was nasty because his family was, I think, killed in an air raid. So he blamed every American for the air raid. But most of them were human beings, you know, in a bad situation, just like I was. I had my two close friends, a Catholic and a Protestant, and I'm Jewish, so the three of us got along fine. Religion didn't mean a thing. We were just buddies in the service. Then towards the end, around, I guess, March or April, they started walking on us. The Russians were coming. We could see the firing of the Russian artillery. And the Germans, for some reason, didn't want us to be there when the Russians came, so they took us to a town called Salzwedel, where we stayed for a few weeks working for the railroad, filling up holes that the Americans bombed the night before. No, when the Americans came through and we knew we were, well, the night before they came through, our guards disappeared, so we knew something was going on, and the Americans came through, and we were glad to see them, of course. And they put us in their trucks and drove us to Hanover Airport, where we sat and ate K-rations for a week, and it was good. After they put us on an airplane and drove us to a camp in France, which was called Lucky Strike, and there was, I understand there was 2 or 3 camps called Different Cigarettes by Chesterfield and like that. And anyways, while we were in the camp for about a week waiting to be shipped back. We got clean uniforms and we got fed good, and I don't remember if we ever saw a doctor, but we eventually got on a boat, Liberty Ship they called it, and we crossed the ocean. While we were in the middle of the ocean, it was around May 15th, maybe 4th, 10th, we heard that the armistice was signed. They stopped fighting, and then we landed in New York City on Mother's Day, and I called my mother. She was happy to hear from me because she hadn't heard from me. She was notified around January 1st that I was missing in action, and she didn't hear anything about me until April 1st, when they notified her that I was a prisoner of war. I contacted my uncle, who was a dentist in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I stayed at their apartment for a few days. And my aunt, after that, kept reminding me of she said, you'd go to the refrigerator and you'd sit there and look and she always told that story, that I kept looking in the refrigerator for food. I just couldn't get enough to eat. My weight went up to about 148 pounds. My normal weight's about 135. At the camp, Lucky Strike, they had milkshakes in a 30-gallon garbage tin can. And then you'd line up and get your cup full, and then you'd get back in line and get another cup full. And one guy killed himself too much. He just overdid it. Your stomach shrinks, so you can't eat too much when you're after being starved for a long time. My mom had problems, physical, nervous problems. And when she heard I was missing, she got in contact with other people, other families that were also in the same situation. So it gave her something to do. And it was, in a way, it was good for her. She got active again because she was depressed before that. She had a big depression. But yeah, she was thrilled to hear that I was okay and coming home. The Army gave me a 2 months furlough. I don't know how, I can't remember how we came about it, but we went to a camp in Saranac Lake in New York State. So we spent some time there, me and my buddy, who had been an old friend from high school, and we reconnected. And after the 2 months furlough, I was reassigned to prison, a GI prison camp in New York State, about 200 miles from Buffalo. One of my jobs was making drawings to improve the camp. We got orders from the War Department that prisoners, ex-prisoners could apply for discharge. I, of course, did apply for discharge, and my commanding officer said, well, if you stay in the service, we can offer you an office and you can have a job drafting, making plans for the whole camp here. And I declined. I said, no, I want to get my discharge. So I happened to have my car with me. I backed it up to the supply office and got a few things like boots and overcoats, and we drove to Fort Dix and got our discharge there. December 2nd, on my 21st birthday. And in January, I started at the University of Buffalo, School of Engineering. Then my dad, in the meantime, the 2 years when I was in school, when I said, I'm not going to be a plumber, I'm going to be an engineer. He sold the business, and he sold the house, and came to California. I finished my 2 years at UB, and I bought him a new car with the help of a relative, a 47 Chevy, and I drove to California. No freeways, no, it was Route 66. I got a job working at North American Aviation. And this particular unit that I was in was projectiles that they would fire from Alamogordo. One of the persons that was giving them advice and working as a consultant was Werner von Braun, who had helped the Germans. And I met him. To him, it was just a job, nothing mattered. And I worked from October, when I got here in October, I worked from October to January. In January, I went to LA State College. I was one of the first students at LA State College. It's on the grounds where LA City College is. And I got a job working at Thrifty Drugstore in their camera department. And I met a guy named Larry in college, introduced me to what they call AZA. It's a Jewish organization of young people. We would have we would have a social get-together with a female group. And that's how I met Ruthie. Well, we met March 11th, 1949. I proposed to her in April, and we were married in October of 1949. So this October will be our 73rd anniversary. Unbelievable. We had a son in 1955 named Sandy, and we had Perry in 1957. Sandy died 3 or 4 years ago when he was 65, cancer. Oh, we got Perry, thank God. He helps us. I was put into Air Research, which was an aerospace company. Their building originally, one of their buildings was originally at the airport on Sepulveda. I spent 20 years working for Air Research. That was the biggest part of my career. There's no fun in being old. It's an accomplishment, but the day-to-day is a struggle. If I didn't have this one problem with my hip, I would have no complaints. I feel, and my hands. I feel good physically, otherwise. I'll tell you, at the turn of the century, 2000, I became 75, and I thought that was an accomplishment. But I was still working, and I was feeling good, and everything was okay. My physical problems just started around 2 or 3 years ago. I have considered myself very lucky. I never got injured in the service. That's one of the medals I don't have, is for injury. The most important one is the Bronze Star. I mean, everybody gets a medal who is in a certain area. And from the dates of being in that area is one medal, and they can be in the same area for the next 6 months, and you get another medal. Or you get a good humor medal. Most of the medals don't mean a hell of a lot. But the fact that I got a Bronze Star for being in one battle for only about 6 hours means something to me. Nobody else, you know. I mean, they have 3 medals, like the Bronze Star, the Silver Star, and the Gold Star. They're given for special. And I've thought to myself, what the hell did I get it for? And I can only figure that because I was dumb enough to stand in front of that window when they were firing at me for 6 hours, that's probably what I got the medal for.
Thank you very much for your time, sir, and for your service.
You're welcome. Anytime.
As a Jew at the time, were you aware of what is going on in the Eastern Europe with the Jews?
Yeah.
How did you know?
We had some cousins who came in 1939 to live in Buffalo that came out of Germany, and we heard some of their stories. And I can't remember how or why I heard and knew, but I knew that while I was in prison camp and we were given one chance out of 4 months to have a shower. As I'm standing there waiting for the water to come on, I'm wondering, is this going to be water or gas? You never know what to expect from the Germans.
So you already knew at the time?
Oh yeah. In the prison camp, there was other camps next to each other, and we could see one camp where there were Russians, and we could see how the Germans would do bad things to the Russian prisoners. I remember vaguely that they treated them badly. They didn't do that much to the Americans. They just counted us every day and starved us, but otherwise it wasn't bad.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, what a past, right? Like every time I'm hearing those kind of things, I'm realizing how lucky I am actually. Like I live in peace you know. For my entire life, there was no war, nothing. You know, there's no reason to be like hungry or any of that. Like we don't know what those things are, and that's why we are spoiled, you know. And you are one of the few people who can still can tell us how it feels to not eat for a month, you know, because under these circumstances we wouldn't be able to do it because the food is everywhere, and our own will is so weak that we will be, after a week we would start eating, you know, because we would be thinking, oh, we are dying. But as you said, you can take much more than you can imagine, you know. So
Yeah.